Hi everyone, this is part 1 of the Highland Cow coloured pencil drawing tutorial. The full tutorial is just under 5 hours long and you can access that by joining my Patreon drawing club. We draw a new animal every month and it includes a full-length drawing video for us to draw along together, along with a PDF guide that includes the full list of pencils we use, an easy outline sketch for you to trace, and a step-by-step photo guide to make it as easy as possible to follow along. You can also buy this tutorial as a standalone one by going to my website, and I'll leave the link for that below. So for step 1, we're going to start off by drawing out the outline of the cow. I've already got a really basic outline sketched using graphite pencil, but now we're going to go over and do a much more detailed outline with a coloured pencil, and I've chosen the Faber-Castell Nougat pencil. This is a really good subtle colour that will blend really nicely into the end drawing. I find it easiest to gradually rub out a section at a time and then go over it with the coloured pencil. So I'm starting off with the hair on the left hand side here. And for this step, I'm really lightly sketching in all the details I can see. And normally I start off by drawing in the larger shapes that I can see, and then I tend to fill in details around that. And this is really useful when you're drawing quite complicated fur like this, as once you've added in some of the larger details, it does become a lot clearer on the paper where everything fits in. So I'm continuing to really lightly sketch in all the outline, and you can see I'm adding a little bit of shading in the areas of shadow that I can see. And this is to help my brain understand where everything is, and it's really about making it clear for yourself. So in a later stage, when we're building up layers of other colours, we're going to know exactly where to put them, and we won't have to waste too much time thinking about it. Again, this is quite a tricky area of fur where a lot of things are overlapping, so I'm taking this really slowly and I'm starting off by drawing in the largest shapes I can see. So we've got this big line down the middle here. and I'm continuing to build up around it. And the good thing with using a pencil that's quite subtle like this Nougat pencil is that if you do end up realizing you've drawn something slightly off where it should be, and you realize that at a later stage when you're adding in shadows or highlights, it is actually really easy to blend this colour out, and that's why I don't start off this stage with a really dark pencil. So we're just going to continue this process across the whole page. I'm drawing in this horn to the left here now. And when it's quite a complicated fur pattern like this, I do tend to work in smaller sections. Then I can really focus on what I'm seeing in this small section instead of getting confused looking at too large an area. This just helps my brain process it, but if you want to work in a slightly different way, that's absolutely fine. Now we're drawing in the outline of the nose, and I'm really trying to pay attention to the shapes I can see in the nose and the alignment of the left side of it to the right hand side, just to make sure that I'm getting the perspective right. And I'm quickly sketching this area below his chin. This section is quite straightforward because all the fur is basically pointing downwards. Now I'll tackle this area to the right hand side of his nose. As always, I'm paying close attention to the direction of the fur and using really light pencil movements. Now I'm doing this in slightly larger sections for the body because it's quite straightforward here and not so complicated. For this bottom section here, I'm really trying to focus on sketching in where the shadows are. Now we've almost finished this step, it's just a case of finishing off the body here. And you don't have to copy the photograph exactly, and you can be a bit looser, especially sketching out the body area. So hopefully you've got something on your paper that looks similar to mine. If it's taking you a bit longer, feel free to take as long as you need until you're happy with how it looks at this stage. I'd really recommend taking your time with this step and ensuring everything's in the right place, as you don't want to put lots of time into colouring it in and building up the layers if it's all going to look wrong at the end. Now we'll move on to step 2, and this is about drawing in the values. And this step is essentially about capturing where the lightest parts of the drawing are and where the darkest parts of the drawing are, and making sure that you've got that sketched in. So I picked out 2 coloured pencils to use for this step. We've got the Faber-Castell Ivory pencil, and that's for the highlights. And then for the shadows, we've got the Caran d'Ache Bleu de Nîmes pencil. And I'm starting off using the ivory pencil and focusing on drawing in the highlights. And if you're looking at the reference photo, you can see these are mainly in the top section in his fringe. So I'm starting to add a few layers of pencil here. I'm not pressing hard, and I'm keeping it all quite loose and light and sketchy. And you can see I'm capturing the little flicks of fur that cross over here as well. And I'm just keeping going with this pencil until I'm happy that I've captured all the highlights I can see. Now I'm switching over to the Blue Denims pencil and I'm going to start sketching in where I see the shadows are. So I'm starting off with the underside of the horn, and then I'm adding a few marks to this lighter section at the top and starting to increase the contrast between the highlights and the shadows. And you can see hopefully that I'm covering the areas that we already sketched out in step 1 with the Nougat pencil. I'm not covering all of the same lines, but I am adding a hint of this blue here and there. And I'm adding a bit more to these areas where the shadows are quite dark and big. But again, I'm not pressing hard with the pencil, I'm just putting a really light layer down, and this ensures that we're able to blend this out at a later stage. And I'm also making sure to constantly be drawing in the direction of fur that we've already mapped out. And even if in the photo I'm seeing a really dark section of shadow, I'm not immediately covering the whole area with this blue. Instead, I'm still drawing in lines instead of making a really dark block of colour straight away. This section below his mouth is quite dark, so I will be spending some time building up this blue layer here. I don't want to cover the whole area, but I do want to make sure it's got that base layer that's going to provide a nice contrast between the top of his head that's really light and the body that's quite dark and in shadow. There's also quite a dark shadow on this ear. And we have almost finished this step. We just need to finish off this ear and then the rest of his body below. And the right side of his body isn't so much in shadow as his head isn't over it. So similar to the hair on top of his head, there isn't actually that much blue that we need to add here. I'm just adding a few lines here and there. And now we've completely covered the drawing with these two pencils to mark in the highlights and the shadows. We can move on to step 3 now, where we're going to draw in his little eye that's peeking out below his fringe. And there are a few more colours involved in this step. So we've got the Faber-Castell black, as it is a really dark eye. Then I've got the Caran d'Ache French grey 30% for that section in the upper left corner of the eye that's quite grey looking. Then I've also got the Caran d'Ache white pencil for blending and those two highlights you can see. Then for the colours, I've got the Faber-Castell Sky Blue, the Faber-Castell Deep Cobalt Green, and finally the Faber-Castell Burnt Carmine, as I am seeing a few pinky tones, especially in the grey portion of the eye. And I almost forgot this one, it's the Faber-Castell Prussian Blue. And this is really good to layer down first in the areas that are black before adding the black pencil itself. It just creates a bit more depth than if you just went straight in with the black pencil. So I'm starting off with this blue and I'm drawing around the edges of the eye and then also the pupil. And I'm making sure to sketch around those two highlights that we can see in the eye, as it's really essential to capture these to make it look realistic. Now I'm using the white pencil to fill in those highlights. And I'm switching to the black pencil now and I'm starting to build up that dark colour we can see. And it's really important to go gradually here, as we don't want to end up with just a really dark blob. So making sure to capture the subtle differences between the slightly lighter centre of the eye and then the really dark edges is really important here. Now I'm just adding a little splash of colour to these highlights using the sky blue. And also a little hint of green with a deep cobalt green. Now I'm using the burnt carmine around the outer section of the eye here. Then I'm blending this with the French grey to make this section just slightly darker and more blended. Now I've picked up the Bleu de Nîmes pencil from the previous step, and I'm using this to colour in the darkest sections of the black parts of the eye, basically the outline of it, to add as much contrast and depth to it as I possibly can. And I'll use the black pencil again to blend the blue out. Now I've got the white pencil again and I'm using a really sharp point just to pick out those highlights again. And a really good tip here is to make sure that you clean off the end of the pencil between marks that you're making, as it will start picking up the dark layers underneath and then it could end up looking quite smudgy. But now that's the eye finished and we can move on to step 4, which is drawing out the nose. So I have picked out a lot of possible colours to use in the nose, so we're just going to go through step by step and see what we actually use. Of course I've picked out quite a few pink tones to use, along with a couple of yellow ones, greens and browns to use. And if you don't have the exact same pencils I'm using, that's fine. You can try to colour match with what you see on the screen. Or if you're using quite a well-known brand of pencils, there are tools online to help you match the colours to what I'm using. And I will list all the pencils that I use exactly in this video in the PDF booklet that you can download. So I'm starting off with the Faber-Castell Caput Mortem Violet, and this is quite a nice dark reddish purpley colour, but it's not too vibrant, so it's really good for wildlife portraits like this. I'm using this one to start building up the darker shadows that we can see. I'm also doing these little dots we can see, especially towards the base of the nose. Now I'm using the Caran d'Ache butternut pencil, which is quite a nice pale yellowy orange colour. And I'm going to add a layer of this across pretty much the whole section of the nose. And I'm just using really light circular movements to build up the layer. And I will add slightly more to some areas, specifically towards the edge as well. Now I've got the Faber-Castell black pencil to draw in this shadow now. And I'll also darken up this section below the nose, as having this contrast here will really help us get the colours right. I'm using the Caput Mortuum Violet again, just to add a little more hint of this purpley colour to the shadows. Now I've got the Caran d'Ache Bleu de Nims, and just like with the eye, we're going to go back into the black areas to build up a little more depth and contrast. Now this is the Caran d'Ache Raw Umber, which is a browny green colour. And you can see the base of the nose is a bit tinted green, so I'm using this colour to start building that up. I'm also using it to capture the texture of the nose. As you can see, there are almost these little dots that are going throughout it. So I'm adding a few dots using this raw umber pencil. Now it's time to add some of that pink colour, so we're using the Faber-Castell Beige Red, and we're going to start building up the pink tones throughout the nose. Now I'm using the Caran d'Ache White as I want to layer up the highlights that we can see, especially at the top of the nose here. I've got this really pink colour from the Faber-Castell range called Pink Madder Lake, and I'm using it just to add a little more of that pink tone towards the edges here. And I'm adding another layer of black to the shadows to make sure they're really dark and contrasting. Now I'm back using the raw umber pencil to add a bit more detail to the nose. And in this step we definitely need to keep switching between colours and building up layers here, as there are quite a few different tones throughout the nose and we want to make sure we capture all of that. This is the butternut pencil again that we're using, and I always draw using really light layers so that we can come back in and build up more colour if we feel we need to, as that's much easier than having to try to rub it out and take it away, which is almost impossible to do with coloured pencils. So using this gradual approach may be a bit more time intensive, but it definitely gives good results. I'm quickly using the Faber-Castell Sky Blue to add a little blue tint right to the tip of his nose here. Now I've got the Faber-Castell Burnt Carmine pencil again, and I'm picking out small areas to add a bit of this colour to. And the final pencil we'll use is the Faber-Castell Olive Green Yellowish, and this is a really nice, quite muted green colour. And I'm softly sketching a little layer towards the bottom portion of the nose, just to build up that green tone that we're seeing in the reference photo. Now that's the end of part 1 of the Highland Cow tutorial. There's 2 more parts to go and you can access them by joining my Patreon drawing club. If you have any questions, just pop a comment below and I'll get back to you. As always, thank you for drawing with me and I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel and let me know what you'd like to learn to draw next.